So this is a big new sci-fi film from director Gareth Edwards, who previously did Star Wars or Rogue One, a Star Wars story, the troubled yet very successful production of back in 2018 or so. I can't even remember, but he hasn't done a film for a while. This is his big new sci-fi film. It takes
Also,
place in the
s- oh, sorry, not to cut you off, but also worth mentioning, he only did like the first cut of that, and then Disney hired Ron Howard to reshoot like chunks of it and finish it. But his name's on it. But like, I don't know that that was perfectly representative of him. But yes, that was his last big thing.
right.
Yeah.
So in the creator, we it takes place in the future where there is this kind of cold war between humans and robots. Robots have been outlawed by the Western world because there's this big nuclear attack that they kind of think that the robots are responsible for. But they do exist in the country of New South Asia, which is kind of a combination of like China, Thailand, present day Vietnam, and it's new. It's a new country. New lines have been drawn. The West is still waging a war on these countries. It's very much a parallel to like Vietnam, the Vietnam War, or the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan. There's a lot of parallels to that. That's our setting, but our protagonist is John David Washington, who plays Joshua. He's a former soldier who's conscripted to find some super AI weapon that's being developed, and he doesn't want to go initially, but there's some evidence that maybe his long lost wife that we thought was dead, but actually may not be, that she may still be alive. So that kind of motivates him to go to suit up and go back into the fray to find this, whatever this AI is, which turns out to be a child, we know because the trailer gives away pretty much the whole movie. Um, and then also hunt for his missing wife. We meet other interesting characters like Ken Watanabe's character, who's like what they call simulants, half robot, kind of half human. We also have Western military forces played by Allison Janney in kind of a strange role. But that's our setup. There's a lot going on. It's a little complicated. It's a really interesting world. Zach, what'd you think?
So I think it's you can't talk about the creator without talking about the visuals, which is why I'm glad you kind of opened with that. Visually, this movie is stunning. It is genuinely stunning. Gareth Edwards has an eye for science fiction presentation that few others have. It is like Villeneuve esque in the look of some of his scale and scope of these cities and giant ships and machines and robots. That stuff is amazing. Unfortunately, the script for Creator is a little loose and it's a little lacking. And for a 2 hour, 15-minute feature, you might end up feeling a little bored in Act Two, or maybe even surprised by where Act Three goes, for better or worse. I like the creator actually. I don't love it though, and it's a shame because it's a movie that I think like almost like Tenet, which is fitting for John David Washington. It's like more about vibes than it is about like actually paying attention,
Yeah.
because the vibe of Creator is great. Just look at the trailer if you're watching the live stream. Like just check us, look at what we've got up here. Like it's so cool looking. Like this mix of practical and CGI and like on the ground handycam work. Like that stuff works so good, but the actual movie, the plot in the middle of it's a little weak, and it bums me out. But I'm excited to talk about it. I know not everybody feels this way. Let's get into it. What's the best place to get going?
I want to start with the positives, and let's start with the visuals because the movie does look absolutely stunning. From we have these landscapes, and they shot a lot on location, like they're in places for stand-ins for like Vietnam or South Asia. But there's these incredible massive structures. Like there's this big military thing called Nomad that's like it's like the International Space Station, but even more enormous, and it just kind of scans the Earth, and it has this big scan that you can see all the way, covering landscapes. And then you have big things like that, a lot of military style robot stuff, but then you have the much smaller details of the what they call the simulants, the um, human robot hybrids, which a lot of times are just like someone's memory, like cloned into this robot. And then they have robots that are 100% robot, but that are still very human, behave very human. The AI is in this world used to, like, do policing or do kind of manual labor jobs. So there's a lot in that role. So I thought the visuals are really stunning.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things about the kind of sentient robots that are roaming is you'll either have you've got a lot of different models, right? As humanity has kind of built these up. Takes place in 2065, so not too far distant future. And you've got everything from like basic maintenance bots that are like roaming the street and cleaning, whatever, street sweeping, like something out of Blade Runner, to like soldier or like police officer bots that are like a lot leaner and taller and have these like flat dome heads. You got like server bots, right, that are out gardening or landscaping. And then you've got your simulants, which are like your halfway step. You've seen these in the trailer. They're the like normal face, but like with a see-through like back end where there would be ears. It's just like a big hole through with like gears whirring in there. And those I think are most interesting because those characters, the simulants in the film, help bridge the gap between humans and robots, which is a very central theme in the creator, right? Like, what is it to have life? What does it mean to have meaning? A very commonly explored sci-fi trope, I think, but one worth looking at, especially in a film as pretty as this one. The simulants really draw your eye because you end up looking at a lot of characters and wondering, is that a real person or not? And often it doesn't make a difference. That's part of what the creator is trying to kind of get at, believe it or not. It's it's a message of like, what does it mean to exist? And is it the same for a robot as it is for a human? Do androids dream of electric sheep? And having these characters that basically functionally are completely human and then just have this kind of short part CGI'd out in the back helps to bridge that gap between like what is mechanical and what isn't. You get some characters who you're not sure. You get some characters who, like, when they turn their head, you're like surprised. You can get multiples, right? Because you've got only so many models of simulants, so you might see two of the same one. Like, that stuff is really neat. And also, like, it's assisted by John David Washington's character being an amputee. He's missing an arm and a leg, and his leg is fully robotic, and his arm is too, but you can only tell, like, the rest of the arm is like flesh, almost like the Terminator, right? Like, it's like wrapped in flesh and skin and whatever.
Like prosthetic, but yeah.
So yeah, like, so for most of the film, like, it's just John David Washington shooting his arm, and they just did like a little touch up with some CGI to go back and cover like the top half of his shoulder. Like, comes off looking great, feels very practical, feels very grounded. All of that's super effective. Like, that's likely the best parts of the film, I think.
Right. I think another highlight are the action scenes. We have a lot of, we have shootouts between like robots versus robots, robots versus humans, humans versus humans. We get some futuristic cars. We have a kind of big battle, like there's battle tanks, or like the one person has kind of a mech suit that has missiles on it. So you have some of this futuristic battle scenes as well. At one point, there's kind of this giant land tank thing. It's like the size of a building. Big kind of battle with that. So the action scenes, I think, are also really good. There's a little bit, sometimes they go on a little bit too long, but that part is really well produced.
It's true. And Edwards uses landscape really well, like, to tell stories visually out on the battlefield, which is neat. There's this great sequence towards the end where he's got all these rebels holding out on this kind of like island fortress, and he's got this really long, narrow wooden bridge like running to the city where like all the police are coming in to attack them, and they shoot all this smoke out, and you've got all this smoke blowing over this like wood. It looks like something out of a Kurosawa movie. Like, it's so thoughtful. I think where the creator starts to suffer, believe it or not, where its action and landscape and visuals are fantastic, is it's things like verbal exposition, which it suffers a lot of. A lot of like big turn moments in the creator where like there will be a big plot change or you'll discover a piece of information are like literally just told from one character to another. They just say it. And it feels so flat because so much of the movie is visual. Like, you learn about the world and how robots interact in it and how simulants are there. Through action and through expression, like visually, of what characters are doing. So when Joshua like finds out this key piece of information about where his wife may be, or even if she's still alive, when that's just kind of like told to him flatly, and then he like hops in a car and drives to the next scene, it feels really weak. And it's a shame because it doesn't always do that, but like, it just feels like a lot of its core plot points like are just just told flat out in dialogue, and it's like, ooh, I miss that bold cinema. I miss that Denis Villeneuve, like Ryan Gosling thinking he might be a replicant human hybrid like thing in a dream sequence where like there's no dialogue at all and you just get all of it through tone. It's lacking a little here, and I think Edwards can get it. I don't know. I think he needs a little bit more confidence in what's in the script, because he helped write it. He wrote it with Chris. I don't remember his name. I'll check it out on IMDb.
Chris Weitz.
Chris Weitz, yes.
Right, and that's where my criticisms start, is with our plot and characters, which are a major part of any movie. But luckily, all the kind of visual elements do a lot of the heavy lifting to keep you from kind of rolling your eyes. But yeah, our characters are again a little weak, a little one-dimensional. John David Washington is the weary soldier. His wife is essentially fridged, meaning that his significant other is, hurt, and that motivates him kind of to action. His wife is named Maya, played by the great Gemma Chan, who I had no idea was in this. I had no idea she was in this movie. She's in a couple of Marvel movies. She's in Crazy Rich Asians.
Love Gemma Chan.
Fabulous. I had no idea she was in this, and I've seen this trailer like 5 or 6 times in the theater. Like, I don't know how I didn't that. Like, she's not very well advertised in this. Her role is kind of small and is largely seen in flashbacks. She doesn't get enough screen time, and then we also have our kind of young, kind of our super weapon / kind of a messianic figure. Called Alfie, played by a young girl named Madeline Una Voiles. Again, it's a sweet kid who, is like, oh, this is the great weapon, the great destructor. They don't do a good job of saying like really what she can do. She appears to kind of have remote powers, which really just kind of turn stuff off, but that needed to be way more interesting. She needed to, I don't know, be a hyper intelligence that could, outthink and outdo humans and something. But it's really one dimensional. It's not very interesting to watch. And then we're hit with a number of like tropes and kind of just sci-fi tropes. You got the weary soldier, the dead wife, the messianic child that will save us all, the kind of like Avatar level angry military personnel. So it's a lot of kind of paint by number stuff.
Yeah, and like I don't mean to agree that it's paint by numbers, but like in this odd way, as you watch it, you start to realize that like a lot of the more interesting elements of the creator start to just fall into place of where you think it'll go in your head, and then it satisfyingly arrives there. For most of this movie, I actually thought it was a lot like Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness, right? It's Joshua's journey with Alfie to find this kind of I don't know, this idea of this kind of like savior of robot kind, right? That may be able to turn the tide and change things forever. They're like deep in the jungle, right? They're traveling from like these cities to cities, and they're evading danger and police and other insurgents, and like all of this like is just slowly getting worn down, and all of it in this like beautiful like landscape, like this wonderful kind of new Asia that's been built here on screen for us to enjoy. Like, that's all really great. I was so taken aback by where Act 3 goes, and that doesn't really happen in these movies. Yeah. And I like, and maybe that's a really satisfying surprise. But when you watch Creator, I would love to chat with you, the listener, about what you think, because we don't do spoilers here on this show. But I couldn't, like, I kept thinking, I was like, well, this isn't going where I think it's going. And for better or worse, it does. And I think in that way, I think Creator is trying to satisfy two masters. Honestly, if I didn't know any better, I'd say there's like a 4-hour cut of Creator out there. And the studio was like, absolutely not. You have to cut this down. And so they just tried to fill in a lot of gaps with like ADR and dialogue. And that's why you end up with these kind of really quick scenes where like somebody will just tell Joshua what to do next, and he just goes and does it. And I told Christine when I got home from watching it, I was like, it reminds me of like a 6-year-old telling you a story, and they just keep saying and then. Like so he runs up to this, and then he gets on the shuttle, and then he goes to the space station, and then he fights the robots, and I'm just like, oh my god, like it just turns into this like breakneck run to the end that's really unsatisfying, like for a movie that is slow admittedly in its first hour 45, but is thoughtful. And I figured this is kind of the intended experience, so that the end's surprisingly jarring.
Yeah, I agree. And Zach and I have not talked about this yet, but I felt the same way. Act 3 is so rushed. And the first two acts have good pacing, I think, and really take their time. And you spend most of your time in like New South Asia. And then you hit Act 3 and you go to like 3 different locations, vastly different locations out of nowhere, and it's like speed running at the end, and it's like you probably should have cut like one of these sequences and just had this wrap up a lot cleaner. It just it's like you needed a few more drafts at the script to really kind of tighten it up. But yeah, man, it's really jarring after 2 acts of kind of more slower paced, thoughtful filmmaking, and then all of a sudden it's just like bam, 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 bam.
Yeah. That being said, like I think somebody going through with a red pen is a soft critique of an otherwise pretty good film. And there's a lot in Creator that works. There really is. Like it is not a bad feature by any means. I think it's going to have its audience. Like I think there are going to be sci-fi fans that are really dedicated to it, in part because the world is just so rich. Like I can't get over how good the world is in the Creator. The world building's excellent in the Creator. But it's just kind of actual plot is just a little loose, a little lacking. And that's, again, a simple critique. That's a simple criticism for an otherwise a movie that works so well. There are so many directors who would flub this whole thing start to finish. Gareth Edwards rolls out of Rogue One, takes the L, right? Ron Howard finishes that movie for him, and he puts this together, and it is not a bad feature. The problem is, I know it's difficult to get high concept sci-fi greenlit, right? Villeneuve infamously said after Blade Runner 2049 was a bomb, he was never making one of these again. And then Warner Brothers told him they'd give him Dune. And here we are, which is amazing. Like, but I mean, he was like right on the edge of like, I'm out. Like I can't do these movies, like there's too much that goes into it. You pour too much in. And I think Edwards maybe just poured in a little too much. And that's so okay. That's so all right. Like, I think the creator is really cool. I'm excited to see what he does next, I think. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, no, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like he's definitely has a great eye for visual effects and for world building. The world building in this is really good. Like I said, there's a lot of parallels and criticisms of basically the wars in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and of generally of Western warfare in general. It's very on the nose about that. It had so much promise. I think several more drafts of the script, and it could have had something really special.
Yeah, like it reminds me of like Spielberg taking a swing at like artificial intelligence, or even like a Neil Blomkamp film, right? Like very District 9, very like on the ground, grimy, grungy robot stuff, like that. I think is, I don't know. I think it's neat. It's got something to it in a time when we're just constantly surrounded by technology. That being said, Andy, would you recommend The Creator?
I would actually. It's grown on me a little bit. It definitely has some issues in plot and character, but I think that's really made up by really stunning visuals and world building. And again, it's got hints of Blade Runner, of Dune, of Apocalypse Now. Like you said, it's really it's kind of a visual feast, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It's not perfect, and if you're a little skeptical, I would say save it for streaming, but I think it's worth checking out.
I'm in the same boat. I think it's not a bad time. I would say, and this is a bit of a disappointment, but hear me out. The visuals are great. They're really fantastic. You do not need to spend money on a premium screen to go see this. I blew the extra cash and went and saw it on like a Dolby screen. Not worth it. Like the action is not that earth shattering that you will be whisked away to a land far away in your experience. Like it's definitely just an expensive screen for this one. That being said, like it's a really pretty film. I think it's really cool. I don't know what streaming service it'll be coming to, but when it comes out, you should go check it out there. Not a bad time. And if you feel differently, by the way, like please let us know. Like, good God, we're not the purveyors of what works in cinema. Like, if you think the third act of Creator is rock solid, like, I'd love to have that conversation, because unfortunately right now I don't know anybody else that's seen this movie other than Andy and I, who are, pretty aligned on how we feel about it. So keep me posted, and write into mail@oscarfilmreview.com to keep up with us and what you think of the Creator. That being said, we should talk about our next segment. Very excited to talk about this. It's been a minute, but we're going to give you the meat and potatoes. Andy, what do we call this?
It's time for the death of cinema.